So, as Robin mentioned, my name is Ash Patel. I'm the Regional Director for the Next Generation Firewall Architecture. That's just recently, I say albeit recently, a year ago, transferred across to Forcepoint. So, a little bit of background on the organisation. So, I don't know how many of you out there have heard the name Forcepoint. New organisation, been around approximately 12 months now, maybe 14 months or so. The technology, the organisation, albeit new, consists really of three sort of very well-known and long-standing technologies and organisations. So Forcepoint's really made up of three brands. Firstly, that of WebSense. WebSense, I'm sure you'll all know, is a specialist and a market leader in web security, email security, and data loss prevention. Further to that pie is Raytheon. Raytheon is a major investor in the Forcepoint organisation, owning approximately 80% of the organisation and injecting 1.9 billion worth of capital into the company. Along with injecting the capital, Raytheon also brought to Forcepoint really sort of two key technologies. One, that of our insider threat analysis, and secondly that of our advanced threat protection. These technologies together are known as SureView, a solution you may or may not be aware of, but until recently, until about 6 months ago, this technology was really only available in the US and was developed for the three-letter government agencies in the US, and today is only available to the friendly countries of the US and the Five Eyes, so in particular the UK in that spectrum. The final part of the puzzle that helped create Forcepoint is that of Stonesoft, which is where my background is. So Stonesoft was a technology that was owned by Intel Security and McAfee, that was divested across to the Forcepoint range approximately 14 months ago. As well as the Stonesoft technology coming across, we also brought across the McAfee Enterprise Firewall technology. So between these organizations of Stonesoft, WebSense and Raytheon Cyber, we've created an organization called Forcepoint that today is by far and away the largest independent security vendor in the world. And not only bringing together some great technologies and market-leading solutions and also capital, what the organization really does bring together is the knowledge and the experience that we have across all these three brands. And where we are really leading this technology to is sort of three key areas and three key challenges that we're trying to address. Firstly, that of adapting and transformable technologies. What we're finding today in the world of cybersecurity is really this consistent and continuous change in the environment. We've seen a huge shift that started probably around about 5-6 years ago in anger towards moving everything to the cloud. Firstly, that was to the cloud within people's own organization and consolidation of servers and virtualization. That has very, very quickly moved to people outsourcing their systems, such as email systems with O365, using things such as AWS and Azure and such. We've also seen a huge shift in change in the way people behave and operate on a daily basis as well. With the advance of mobile devices and internet things, I'm sure today none of you could survive without your email on your phone. And really what this has done is change the threat landscape and also change the landscape of what we're trying to protect today. So rather than just protecting the perimeter as we have done for the last 20 years, we're now finding it difficult to understand really where the perimeter is, when it starts and when it stops, whether we should be protecting people while they're at home, out on the road, whether connecting to the cloud or whether connecting from office to office. So what this really does require is a technology and a solution that really moves with your organization as it adapts and changes. And that's one of the areas I'll touch on later today while going through the Forcepoint next generation firewall architecture. The other challenge that we have to address is an ongoing challenge, and that's really of the escalating threat. In 2016, for example, we saw more pieces of malware being traded and used across the 12 months of 2016 as we did across the last 11 years, just to give you an idea of the scale of the problem. And this is why you are seeing governments talking about cybersecurity, not just at a corporate level, but also at a consumer level today. We've seen the threats landscape not only increase in the manner I've just mentioned, but also change in the way it's adapting itself. So we had approximately about 6 months ago, we had the attack on Tesco Bank, which was, in my eyes, really the first large-scale attack that was aimed at consumers by directly removing cash from consumer bank accounts. And if I remember rightly, there was around about 300,000 consumers that were affected by that. Prior to that, really the threat landscape was very much a business-to-business process where it was people taking data, credit card numbers, etc., or causing some sort of damage to a third-party organization. But really it's cascaded now across all the way from the consumer, from people at home, right the way through to state governments and corporations in between. And just yesterday we saw headline news of a WikiLeaks whereby there was discussion of of intelligence agencies attacking and breaking into Internet of Things, let's call them, such as Samsung TVs that were mentioned just in yesterday's news, and taking control of mics and such. So really, with any technology you're looking to promote as resellers in the cybersecurity business, we really need to consider that of the escalating threat landscape. And the third part of the puzzle really is about the reduction of complexity. We saw just in 2016 450 vendors at RSA. 2017, we haven't got the final figures yet, but we'll believe those were around about 480 different vendors in that space. Now, I've been attending InfoSec in London now for the last 17, 18 years or so. And I know when I first started attending there were about 35 to 50 vendors. Today at InfoSec we have about 300, 350 vendors there. And I'm sure when you send your clients to InfoSec, one of the key things that happens is they go in there with an idea of what they're looking for. They leave more confused than when they did when they first entered. So one of the key challenges to the security industry as a whole and the vendor community is really about reducing that complexity and that data overload that we have there. So taking the customer away from the average of 15 to 25 different vendors they have today in their security portfolio on their network, and really trying to reduce that to a capacity of around about sort of 6 to 10, thereby taking away at least 10 to 15 different management consoles that they're having to use on a daily basis. So with that said, the technology that we're going to be discussing today, the Forcepoint next generation firewall, really does look at sort of four key areas. Firstly, that of business productivity, risk, operational costs, and compliance. So if we take a first look at the business productivity, what we're talking about here really is the ability to provide a solution that not only secures your environment, but also helps you deliver a better business process to the organization out there. So that's offering things such as zero downtime on upgrades of architecture, offering a resilient WAN architecture, but predominantly focusing on an area where we have quite a unique approach, which is that of multi-link and business continuity and resilience approach. So if I jump onto that, there's three key areas we really look at when talking about resilience and resilience architecture within the Forcepoint next generation firewall. Firstly, that's of the management resilience. So the firewall architecture is controlled by a management platform called the SMC. The SMC itself is a piece of software that's run on a server. That server can be replicated across the world on up to 5 different locations and 5 different platforms, should I say, working on a master and slave sort of process. So you'll have one server up and running, doing all the legwork, and the other one's taking backups of that. If the master server falls over for whatever reason, or perhaps can't be accessed for loss of connectivity or whatever it may be, quite simply the secondary server will pop up and take control. So it allows your customers to have a fully resilient management architecture when looking after their firewall architecture. The second part of the puzzle, really, in resilience, is that of connectivity. So we have a unique technology called Multi-Link that allows us to fail over internet connections simultaneously, and we'll go a little bit deeper into that in a moment. And thirdly, that the area of resiliency that we adopt and apply using the firewall architecture is that of site resiliency. So ensuring that the site that you're on today and the firewalls that are controlling and protecting that local site are clusterable, that are highly available, and that are resilient. So I'll just jump a little bit deeper into the resiliency of the firewall architecture. So today, with the Forcepoint next generation firewall architecture, we work in what we classify as an active-active environment. So quite simply, and you can do the base level of this really with most major firewalls today. So you can take 2 firewalls, put them together in a logical cluster, and have them work in a fault-tolerant way. So one's processing traffic, and the other one will pipe up when firewall A falls over. Where we really differ from our competitors in this space is we work naturally in an active-active environment. So any firewall you add to a cluster will work in an active environment, so it will process traffic. So the first firewall will process traffic, second one will do the same, and the third one, and they will share the load between them, giving you an active-active high availability environment. Not only can we cluster 2 firewalls like most of our competitors, but we can actually cluster up to 16 active firewalls in one logical cluster without the use of any third-party load balancing equipment, so no need to add things like F5 or Radware into the equation. Further to that, where our active capability really comes into place is the seamless upgrades that we allow with the architecture. So if we can imagine these 3 firewalls here on the right-hand side, all working on version 5.8 for argument's sake, and we need to upgrade them to version 6.0. Quite simply, we would remove one of those firewalls from the cluster, upgrade it to 6.0, pop it back in the cluster, and it would happily work with the other ones on different versions, and then continue the process across the different firewalls you have in the cluster. What that means to your customers is they can upgrade firewalls without taking down the firewall infrastructure. With all our competitors out there today, if you were to upgrade a pair of firewalls in a logical cluster, they would have to remove both firewalls, cause downtime to the infrastructure, make them both the same, upgrade them both to the same versions, then bring them back up again. That means either someone has to work out of hours or downtime has to be allowed for, so you have those service breaks, which is really what we avoid with our seamless upgrade technology here. So avoiding those situations, I'm sure you've all seen when logging into applications like Salesforce and such, saying this service will be closed at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. As we all know, we're all working at odd and different times nowadays and from different locations, so sort of downtime really isn't an option. So this really does remove the need for that downtime to do those software upgrades, as well as being able to upgrade devices and have them working on different versions simultaneously. We also can cluster different hardware versions of the firewall architecture. So for instance, there you've got 3 firewalls sitting in a logical cluster. We could have 3 different physical hardware devices. So we could have, for argument's sake, the firewall 1035 clustered with a 1065 clustered with a 1401. This really does allow customers to upgrade their architecture without having to refresh the entire estate, so thereby saving them a lot of capital expenditure. Further to that, when firewalls do, and they will from time to time, thank God it's not often, but when a firewall does fall over for whatever reason, maybe someone spilled coffee on it or it overheated because the cooling system broke down in the server room, if one of those firewalls comes out of the cluster for whatever reason, quite simply the traffic will fail over transparently to the other remaining firewalls in the cluster and ensure there's no loss of connectivity to the internet and no loss of trading time for your clients. Now this technology, along with 99% of the technology we have built into the firewalls, comes as standard within the firewall licensing, so there's nothing additional for your clients to buy or invest in. Further to the resilient conversation, we also have a patented technology built into the firewall architecture, which is branded as multi-link. The multi-link architecture really does allow the firewall allows a firewall to enable the organization to use multiple internet connections simultaneously into the back of the firewall, regardless of provider or format. So the example we have here in front of us really is a local firewall in location A sending traffic out across to firewall in location B, and quite simply the traffic is being shared across both internet connections simultaneously, and you can determine which lines the traffic goes over quite simply on the type of traffic, on the sheer quantity of traffic, and you can apply a quality of service and a bandwidth management capability of this traffic as well. And once again, this multi-link technology comes as standard in the firewall architecture without any additional cost, negating the need once again of architectures, load balancing architectures such as F5, Radware, and even things like MPLS networks, which is what I'll discuss here. So where you've got organizations, which is really where our technology is most suited, organizations with multiple sites scattered, whether it be across the UK or geographically across the world, we can deploy the Forcepoint next generation firewall architecture at all the sites globally, and then create what we'd classify as a fully meshed VPN network. So when sending traffic from site A, from the headquarters, to site B out in New York and site C in Tokyo, we can send traffic over either ISP-A, ISP-B, ISP-C, over the MPLS network, whichever connectivity they have, and quite simply we'll know what we sent from HQ to what was received in location A or location B. If for whatever reason one of those lines fails, whether it be a hardware failure on the ISP site or whether it be a JCB digging a hole in the ground outside your building, quite simply we'll know what information was sent and what wasn't received, and quite simply resend that missing packet of information. We can move traffic so quickly across these internet links that we can have a voice over IP call running from site A to site B, lose a connection, retain that voice connection over the secondary site without any loss of or degradation of traffic flow from site A to site B. So really delivering not only a secure environment using the firewall architecture, but also a resilient environment. But further to that, there's also huge cost savings as well for customers to perhaps slowly migrate and move away from MPLS networks, or alternatively enhance their MPLS networks by providing additional internet connectivity to create that wide area network. We have organizations using this technology not just with fixed lines, as we've mentioned there, but also using things such as 3G dongles and cards that are stuck in the side of the firewall that will perhaps store the traffic over the cellular network rather than over the ADSL or fixed line connections that you have there in a case of emergency. The other area of firewalls, which I feel really isn't spoken about much nowadays since the advent and the conversation around next generation firewalls, inverted commas, over the last 5 years, we've really forgotten that firewalls are actually security devices, and it's important for organizations to remember these are the devices that are there at the gateway keeping them safe. So albeit, you know, connectivity is important like I spoke, and high availability is important like I spoke about, but the efficacy around a firewall architecture is hugely important. So there's a couple of areas I'm going to touch on with regard to that, and in particular that of the multi-layer inspection architecture we use in the firewall architecture. So we have a 6-step process when inspecting traffic as it hits our firewalls. Firstly, that of access control. So quite simply, when the traffic hits the firewall, the first thing we'll do is do simple lookups such as IP reputational information, geo-protection information, all information that we cross-reference against our own databases from the historical Stonesoft databases, but also across the Raytheon architecture and the WebSense architecture that's been brought into the equation here as well. We then will apply some traffic control to those, so understanding the user identification, the applications people are visiting, ensuring that nothing's breached and everything is allowed to come through. If you've invested in the URL categorization in the firewall architecture, so making sure people aren't going to sites that are inappropriate, whether it be shopping sites, sports sites, or any sort of other sort of non-business sites, let's say, we can very quickly sort of eradicate those and push those aside. The third part of the puzzle really is that of normalization. So this is where we do full protocol analysis of the traffic to understand that traffic is exactly what it says it is before allowing it further down the stack into the firewall inspection process. We also decrypt all the encrypted traffic at this point as well. So all that HTTPS traffic, which approximately 80% of the traffic is today, we encrypt that, and then we're able to inspect that traffic just that little bit further to ensure it is what it says it is before we allow it through. The fourth part of the puzzle really is an architecture that was brought in from the McAfee enterprise firewall processes, where we can apply the proxy-based solutions around the firewall architecture. So really allowing the ability to whitelist applications, to stop that traffic in its tracks when it needs to be stopped, and doing that further due diligence. And this is really getting deeper into the packet analysis at this layer. The fifth part of the puzzle is bringing the IPS capability in the firewall architecture, because one thing we have to remember is when investing in next generation firewalls, we're not just investing in a firewall architecture, we're also investing in an IPS and an intrusion prevention architecture. So this is where we use our full IPS signature listing and really tear those packets apart to understand what bad things are in there, and as we say there, sort of the anomaly detection capabilities. And the final part of the puzzle is the malware detection. So this is running it against the malware scanning engines. Once we've eradicated the first 5 layers, have got rid of the sort of white noise, we can get into the deeper aspects of sandboxing and such, and file reputation. So when we're climbing this ladder of these 6 steps, the first part of the process really doesn't take a huge amount of processing power for the firewall. The latter layers absolutely do. Because of categorizing the cleanliness of traffic in this 6-step process, what we do is really reduce the unnecessary consumption of capability of the firewall. So we reduce all the threat volume very quickly at stage 1, 2, and 3. And then when we get to the sort of the serious threats, we can take some time over them in stage 4, 5, and 6, and really apply a lot more processing power to the threats where it's needed, thereby delivering a much securer traffic throughput, but also ensuring the traffic goes through the process a lot quicker pace by not applying all process to all pieces of traffic. Touching a little bit further on the IPS side of things, so the next generation firewall we're speaking about here from Forcepoint is a full-blown next generation firewall, but also it can be used as an IPS architecture, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. But just to let you know that running as a pure play IPS, we have in the NSS Labs report of late last year, we gained 99.9% security effectiveness. We blocked 100% of the application layer attacks. And then further to that, as you'll see here, we really were up at the top end of the bar and left some pure play IPS vendors such as Intel Security with McAfee NSP platform, IBM with its ISS platform, really left them straggling at the back end there, whilst we were delivering very, very high performance pure play IPS results. And I think it's important to share this with your client base because, as I said, when a customer is looking at a next generation firewall, they also need to know that it's a very, very good it has very, very good IPS capabilities built in there as standard. So all our IPS capabilities are fully loaded in the firewall when it's shipped, and there's nothing extra to sell your clients at that stage, which is a wonderful cost saving for your client there. It's okay for me to say how sort of great and secure our firewall is, and you've seen the NSS Labs report out there. One of the a new report that NSS have been working on is called CAWS. You may or may not have come across it. It's quite a new process that they've done. It's the Cyber Advanced Warning System. So if you go to that URL down there at the bottom, nsslabs.com/register, if you go to that report there, what you will see and be able to do is register to this environment, and you'll be able to actually go in there and compare, or your customers can go in there and compare firewalls against each other in the real world with real zero-day threats that have just been found over the last 24 hours, 36 hours or 48 hours or whatever it may be. As you can see there on the right-hand side, I just popped in there around about 10 days ago, did a quick comparison against Palo Alto, Checkpoint and ourselves with regard to zero-day threats against our products, all our three products in the real world. And across the zero-day attacks that were notified to cause across that 7-day period, you can quite quickly see we were in single digits about what we let through. Other vendors, as you can see quite clearly there, were in triple digits about what zero-day threats are coming through. So when evaluating next-generation firewall technologies, it's very, very important for you to share with your clients the absolute capabilities of blocking real-world attacks with the technology they use. So it's not just about following the big bright star of people that are shouting out there with wonderful marketing funds about how wonderful they are. It's about actually going to organizations like NSS and looking at the real world capability in these next generation firewall architecture that really is about stopping those advanced threats out there. Further to that, the other area of firewall architecture that we really need to think about is the scalability and the manageability around there. So understanding that we have a solution that is a centralized management solution that's easy to use on a daily basis, and really about reducing the complexity around firewall management. One of the things I'm sure you'll find out there when talking to your customers is that one thing they don't have is time. Yeah, I think globally, a report I just read earlier this month, globally we have today 1,700 vacancies in the cyber security arena. So just to give you an idea of the workload these people are under. So manageability of firewall architecture, and if we can reduce the time people spend on this and the time to deploy, is really, really important to these organizations. So with that said, the SMC that we use to control the firewalls is used not only to control the firewalls, whether it's deployed as a physical or a virtual appliance, but also is used to deploy the firewall and use and control the firewall if it's used as a next generation firewall, if it's used as a layer 2 firewall, or if it's used as an IPS technology. And we'll come on to how we can split the platforms with the technology a little later on. To give you a real-world example of sort of how we reduce the complexity with our management console, we have a global retail customer that's run out of Europe. they had, when we first looked at their migrated them from Checkpoint across to ourselves, they had 10,000 rules within their firewall. We pulled all those rules across into our management console within a couple of days, within 2 days of using a system we have in there called hit cells. Quite quickly on the right hand side there, we could see which rules were used and which rules weren't used. And by doing that, we eradicated 8,000 rules from their policy set within 2 days. What that meant was two things. A, when the customer was looking at his policy set, he only needed to look and evaluate 2,000 rules rather than 10,000 rules, so that saved 5 amounts of his time, let's say, a factor of 5. But also what it meant was when a packet hit the firewall and had to cascade through all those rules to determine what that packet must and mustn't do, which is the way a firewall operates, that packet only had to cascade through 2,000 rules rather than 10,000 rules, which meant naturally the traffic flow through that firewall was much, much quicker, and the end users within that organization were getting a better experience because the traffic flow was a lot quicker. Other areas of interest we have within the firewall management platform is that of our cloud deployment. So this is a wonderful solution not only for organizations that have 50, 60, 70, 100, 200, 2,000 firewalls to deploy, but also a great solution for managed service partners that perhaps you may want to consider being one, managed service partners being able to deploy firewalls for their customers. So what we have here really is what we classify as cloud deployment. So a customer or yourselves as a managed service provider could deploy firewalls globally without ever touching them and without ever sending an engineer to site. So quite simply, a firewall can be shipped from our distribution center across to the client's site out in Tokyo, for example, as long as they've got someone there capable of plugging a cable, an RJ45 cable into the back of the firewall and plugging it into the wall and switching it on, like you do with your router at home when you get it off BT or Virgin or whoever it may be. Plug it in, switch it on. As soon as that firewall boots up, it goes off to the cloud, finds its pre-configuration, that's pushed down to the firewall. The firewall then pushes back out once it knows where it needs to go to from that pre-configuration, pushes back out to the management center, which could be your client's head office in London. The policies are pushed down, the firewall is up and running. You have now deployed firewalls globally without ever leaving the office. That saves a huge amount of cash for your customer and a huge amount of time for your customer, which is quite often one of the key reasons why large organizations do not change firewall vendors, because 50% of the cost to change firewall vendor comes through the actual process of migrating from one vendor to another rather than through the capital expenditure of buying the technology. And what we can do here is really eradicate that cost for the customer, or alternatively offer you as a value-added reseller the capability of offering this service to your customer as well. The final part of the puzzle in the chain really is that of compliance and visibility, about having audit-friendly technology. We're hearing lots of things today about GDPR. Historically, we've had things and still ongoing through things such as PCI compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley, etc., etc. And with that, it doesn't matter what technology you're using, you need very good visibility to be able to prove your compliance and show when things are happening in real time. And as we all know, with GDPR coming up, you've got 72 hours now to really show where, what happened with that vulnerability or that breach or whatever it may have occurred. So with that said, if we look at the PCI DSS, for example, these are just a handful of the requirements that are needed there. And the SMC, the management console, really can help you determine where that change took place, what happened with that change, who changed it, who authorized it, and really give you that full sort of knowledge and understanding and trust about what's actually happening with that technology on your network. So the next generation firewall itself is built up of what we call a unified software core, which basically means when you buy it and when it's delivered to you as a next generation firewall. You can choose, as an end customer, you can choose how you use the technology. So you could use the technology today as a next generation firewall. You could deploy it as a pure play IPS solution, where perhaps you may be selling technologies such as tipping point, top layer, ISS, etc., etc. You can deploy it as an IPS solution, or you can deploy it as a layer 2 firewall solution. So your client, when buying the technology new, may today buy it as a next generation firewall. However, you may find in 3 years' time he's using it on a remote location in China, for example. He's decided to close the 2 offices in China down and now has 2 spare firewalls. So rather than having 2 spare firewalls, your customer will have 2 spare security devices. So he could take those firewalls, repurpose them as IPS devices and bring them back to his London head office, for example. Yeah, and the cost to do that is 0. So the software that's built onto the next generation firewall really just allows you to determine and your customer to determine how to use and exploit that technology. And what this really does give the client is the flexibility in the architecture for it to move in the direction his organization or her organization is moving in, you know, without the need to eradicate unnecessarily good devices that they have, and they can really sweat those assets for a longer period of time. So with regard to the appliances, we have everything from the smallest device there on the left for the Firewall 110 right through to the larger devices on the 5206, and we've got some other new boxes coming out that are even bigger in the telco space as well. But what you'll find is everything from the Firewall 321 right through to the largest devices do everything that I've just mentioned. So they offer full resiliency, multi-link technology, they have antivirus built in a standard, they have quality of service built in a standard, etc., etc. So there's not a case of our smaller 3 series devices not offering the same as the 52 series devices. They all have all the functioning on there and already switched on and ready to use. So when specifying what devices your clients need, you really only need to consider 2 things. A, the port density in there, and B, the throughput in there. One thing I would always say from a pure sales perspective is when discussing and specifying a firewall architecture to your clients, remember they will likely keep this product for 5 years. And we have on average a 20% growth in data consumption year on year, which basically means in year 5, if he still plans to be using this technology, year 4 and 5, the box will need to be twice as quick as what he needs today. So if your client is saying today he needs the next generation firewall throughput of 4 gig, explain to him with this 20% growth year on year, if he wants to be using it year 4 and 5, then he really needs to be considering an 8 gig throughput firewall. What does that give you? That gives you a sale of a firewall that's twice as big as you would have before, which is always a good thing from a sales side. Also remember as well, if your client, if she's only asking you for 1 firewall, make sure we talk to them about 2 firewalls to keep them in a logical cluster, just in case one falls over, the other one will keep processing traffic and avoid that downtime scenario which we spoke about very early on. As well as having the physical devices, we also have the virtual devices as well. So the technology runs on VMware, KVM and Oracle. We also have the technology available in AWS, and in Q3 this year we'll have the technology available in Azure, the Microsoft Cloud as well. And once again, the technology, whether you use it as a virtual device or a physical device, is identical in its feature set. There's no features that are taken out of the firewall technology there. So I appreciate, you know, we've sort of a quick whiz through this, and you know, we've got some time allowed for questions in the end. But just to touch on a few other pieces as well that perhaps we've not discussed in detail as a pure play next generation firewall. We'll have full application aware capability in this firewall. We have antivirus built as standard in the firewall. We have DDoS protection built as standard in the firewall. As I mentioned earlier, we can have HTTPS inspection, so the ability to unencrypt traffic. We can also load balance third-party servers with this firewall. We can do quality of service as well as standard within the firewall, compress log files. We're also leveraging today as well, not just the technology we had in the firewall previously as it was under Stonesoft and McAfee and using the McAfee AV agents in there, but we're also leveraging now the knowledge and the experience from the Forcepoint, or the WebSense, should I say, side of the business by bringing in the threat seeker intelligence as well from the award-winning what was the WebSense URL side of the business, and the knowledge from their ACE architecture there. So with that said, and hopefully I'm on time, that's me. That's a very, very quick overview of the firewall architecture, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any out there.
Okay, so we're just waiting a couple of minutes to see if there's any questions, but if anyone has any questions that they can't think of now, we can take those offline.